We're going live. Okay. Okay, there we go. All right, I see your synthesizer. I see some logos. I see my dramatically lit. So can you show the Zoom meeting so we can see ourselves on OBS?
Yes.
And people are hearing all of our behind the curtain talk here.
About like this. Or maybe I'll put it this. Then when we talk, we're here. What do you think?
Okay. I'll have to. It'll probably show up in about 30 seconds on my end So for those of you waiting at home patiently, I am Peter Nybor with Sensel, and I'm here with Hugo Paris, and he is actually driving the stream today because he's going to be playing some audio as part of this stream, and I wanted to make sure we had good audio coming out of this. So I see your window, and yeah, I guess that's fine.
It's going to move around because I moved it a little bit.
Okay, and do you have, let's see, I see 3 images on there, if I'm not mistaken. So let me see what this looks like. Oh, okay, you're in there twice. So you might want to go to like gallery view or something in Zoom.
Speaker view. Oh, I see.
Yeah. So this is all part of the figuring it out as we go nature of things, which is even more omnipresent for us all than it was before. I fit in great to this, like, oh my God, I got to figure something out, because that's what I'm constantly doing. So.
You can move us.
All right. So I think we're ready. As long as you're pleased with our image, with the image that we project to the world.
Yeah.
All right, great. And I'm going to move over here. And this light is killing me. I'm going to turn that down a little bit. And all right, cool. All right, well, welcome to the Sensel live stream. We're doing this, co-presenting this with our retail partners up in Portland, Oregon. That would be Control Voltage. And part of the reason we're doing that is because our guest today, Hugo Paris, is a Portland resident. So we're going full Portland today. I'm down here in California, so West Coast is what we're all about today. Hugo Paris. So we first met my colleague Mark, who I work closely with. He met Hugo at the MUTEK, inaugural San Francisco MUTEK Festival. MUTEK is a worldwide festival, and they've been doing things in Montreal, started in Montreal, Mexico City. I believe they've done a Tokyo event, and last year they first started with the San Francisco event. So Hugo was part of a panel on that. We met, and he was really intrigued by what we were doing with the Morph. And we started talking, and he was telling us about like how he works with sound and works with music and performs. And we're like, wow, yeah, well, let's see if we can work together. And here we are. So today we're going to be presenting some of his story, some of his work, and we're going to be diving deep into his modular setup that includes the Sensel Morph with the Scorp Hermod as a USB host and CV generator. So welcome, Hugo Paris.
Hello, Peter.
Joining us.
Thank you for having me. This is fun.
Absolutely. So you are in Portland. How long have you been in Portland? You've been there for about 3 or 4 years. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I moved here 3 years ago. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
more than a year and a half. Yeah.
Originally, you hail from the south of France, though.
That's correct. Yes.
Is it Roussillon?
Yeah, Languedoc-Roussillon.
Okay. And so then you studied engineering and made your way to the United States with a master's internship at MIT, and ended up studying gravitational waves for 5 years at MIT, or working on a gravitational waves project, I should say. And so those are much lower frequency than audio waves. So this is a great sort of like combination that I saw and immediately was like, oh, that's cool. Because myself, like I sort of got into sound sort of as a combination of mathematics and sound at UC Santa Cruz. And so, yeah, there's definitely something we can talk about here because, you know, gravity waves, much lower vibration, much harder to detect than sound waves. Were you doing sound work prior or at the same time when you were working on a gravitational wave study?
I was. I think I've always been into music from the time I started playing guitar. Are you still here? I cannot see you. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. But this is like my first stream.
All right.
Like this, and it's on my my studio, and it's like my home too, and so that's like kind of a new thing. So I hope it looks okay. I hope it sounds okay. But if it doesn't, let me know and we'll adjust it as we go.
I hear you fine.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just very happy to be doing this, and so I did start guitar with music with guitar. I got my first guitar. I was 12.
Wow, that's like same story as me.
Yeah, right. It happened to a lot of us.
Yeah.
And my mom later confessed to a friend of mine that she had got me this electric guitar when I was 12, so that I could get it out of my system before high school. She didn't plan well because I didn't touch it in middle school. And in high school, someone gave me a guitar amp. I took it home. I remember plugging my guitar for the first time, plugging the jack into the guitar and the jack in the amp. And from that day, I've been playing music every day. And I was just entering high school when I started guitar. So
nice.
Sorry, Mom.
Did you play in bands, or were you mostly studying on your own? Were you self-taught, or were you sort of like studying like a classical curriculum, or how did that?
That's something I would have really liked. France has nice opportunities for learning with conservatoire. However, you have to start quite young, especially for guitar or violin. It's not the same for bass, like standard bass, but for guitar and violin, you have to start quite young because they're really trying to foster prodigies.
Yes.
So, and also I'm from more of a modest background, and so to train myself to get into this, I would have needed to take classes, and a lot of them, and get tutoring and private instructors. And that's not something that was in the cards for me at that time. So mostly self-taught. I had a couple, maybe a few months of lessons with a family friend who is a jazz guitar player, and introduced me to chords, which like, it's insane. Like I think about him every time I pick my guitar. Like I have a folk guitar on the wall.
Yeah.
And every once in a while I pick it up, just jam, and play some tunes. And it's like the same chords that I learned in the first month of my guitar lessons.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful that he taught them to me in this way. And he organized the teaching in a way that was like, I think he kind of went, I didn't know, he didn't explain that to me, but I think we went 1, 4, 5 in every key or something like that. Like something that was like, I learned CFG first, basically,
right?
And then we added, whatever D. So we kind of worked like this, and it was well organized. And within a month, I had like 12 chords that I could play most of the songs with. Because also, with guitar, once you know your chords at the bottom of the neck and then the bar chords, you can pretty much flow anywhere, especially with a capo.
It's much more isomorphic than a piano. So you can, if you know a G one place, you can play a G in another key, and you're okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to adjust your mechanics.
It's interesting. It's very interesting because guitar has this isomorphic property to it, which is great. But also it has the big challenge of like, same note can be at multiple points on your neck. Whereas on a piano, a given note of a given octave is just one spot.
Right.
And for people that don't have a trained ear just yet, I think piano might be better because it's just a horizontal dimension. Whereas guitar also has like X and Y, also has Y.
Yeah.
So started with guitar. Then I kind of wanted to play bass. I was kind of a bit of classes, and then developed it on my own. I just played every day. I had methods that I was following. I quickly gravitated towards wanting to be in bands and really wanting to start bands.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for me, I was in a small village in the south of France, and so the kids in my neighborhood, they were more interested in mopeds, and which I actually was really interested in, but I didn't have one until much later.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the one that I didn't have the badass one, and
Of course not.
But they had the badass ones, and so they were. I mean, if I had a moped, I might have dropped guitar, and I might be in a very different place now. I might be like a moped racer somewhere.
Probably not, but let's not too many of those. There's probably more synthesizer players than there are moped racers. But
hey, when I was a teen, I was getting those magazines from the magazine store, and it's Moped magazine, and it's people just spending all their extra money and time on like tuning up mopeds for racing, and it's adults. It's not like teenagers.
Right.
So,
all right.
There could have been a culture, but
there's many subcultures. Many subcultures.
Yes.
So how did you? So then, when did you get into like synthesis? Because clearly we see on our screen right now a really nice like modular setup that is well sized, but also fairly portable as far as these things go. And and it's also I should also mention that one of your main modules there is the SWN from 4MS, which is something that you worked on creating. It's a polyphonic module that that it works within the Eurorack system. So how did you end up sort of making that? Was that like more of a shift once you started doing more engineering? You sort of started thinking like, oh, the guitar is not necessarily a note source, it's a sound source. And I mean, that's how I'm just extrapolating, because that was kind of my experience. It's like, oh, it's more interesting to me as its sound source than it is as a way for me to put notes out into the world. Partly because I was
right, especially when you start discovering pedals and stuff like that.
Yes.
Like, it starts opening up, and then you're like, oh, I kind of like playing the pedals. So I had this experience like playing my Ibanez thrash metal sound tank like pedal, really cheap plastic pedal that you cannot. You have to be careful when you stomp on it. It's a stomp box, but you're not supposed to stomp on it.
It's a tap box.
Yeah, it's a gentle tap box. And, it was really gnarly, and I played it through my 70s jazz amp that had like this really rattly metallic spring verb in it, and it was just like, I didn't really know what the knobs did. I just turned everything to 10 and rocked, and that was really fun. I also grew up listening to electronic music because my friends in my village, they did listen to electronic music, which I really liked, and I got exposed to, of course, dance, and so lots of synthesizers in there, but also Gabber, which was big when I was a kid. And for those who don't know, that's a pretty intense techno style that's like super fast, and people call it happy hardcore. There's also happy hardcore.
Yes.
And I was like, so I had like dubbed copies of cassettes of Thunderdome and all those guys, which are like festivals, and they would make a compilation of the DJ tracks of the DJs who played at that festival. And I would listen to this and be like, what are these sounds? Like, these are from another planet. And I'm not a teenager. Like, this is younger. So I first encountered synthesizers through that. And through my uncle, who makes music, and he has keyboards. And he had a studio at my grandparents, and I spent a lot of time at my grandparents. So I got exposed to that. I didn't know what it was. I just heard the sounds, and it was like the late 80s. As far as my memories go, it would be like early 90s. So it's right, my uncle had an M1, he had a D50, like those synthesizers that have very glassy and like refreshing sounds. I just remember like growing up with those sounds around me and just thinking like, this is just like so fresh. Like of course I was in Provence, and with very nice weather, and going to the beach and to rivers, and so this overall vibe of like, and also the productions of that time, especially dance music, was so like upbeat and like fun, like
Uh-huh.
commercial dance music. So I had this, and then I moved into like my teenager years where it was more like guitar and like more of a electric edge and like abrasive sounds, and trying to be in bands and stuff. But
Yeah.
I couldn't find bands that really fitted what I wanted to do in the surrounding of my village. So I would often drive a lot to join a band or create one, and you know how it is. I mean, we've all had bands, and it doesn't
Yes.
always work out.
Right.
But I had lots of fun. I met lots of great people. I played my first shows, and I developed an ear. I very early on started producing with a cracked copy of Acid Pro 4, Sony's DAW,
Mm-hmm.
and that someone gave me, and it was like, oh, you want something to make music on your computer? I was like, yeah, whatever. And I had a crappy computer, and it was that and Fruity Loops, like one of the first versions.
Yes. Yeah.
And I had no clue what I was looking at. You know, the buttons on Fruity Loops that are like TR 909 buttons.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I didn't know what it was. It just looked like buttons to me. I didn't know what way they chose this interface.
Yeah.
But I just started messing with it and played a lot of guitar and trying to create like stuff. And I really like, that's when I realized I like music, but I also really like sound.
Yeah. So
like sitting down and dialing like EQs and like, you know, adding effects and really trying to push boundaries, like take a sound, take a note, and just like completely like warp it with something and just see where it goes.
Yeah. So how would you, currently your sound tends towards a lot of like timbral, you know, so that's why I was kind of curious about, like, cause it's like guitar, you know, classic, you know, sort of jazz chords and stuff like that. It's a lot of like melody and rhythm. A lot of what you're doing now incorporates a lot of just timbre and a lot of lush timbre. You're doing, you know, you definitely include beats for sure. It's not all wash. You know, so you're, you know, listening to your albums is definitely a mixed. It's definitely a mixed presentation. You know, it's you go through various moods and journeys in that regard. But the really like big, you definitely do have an ear for the big timbres, and you know, and that is kind of like, it comes out of, you know, like I said, you know, you've been working with the polyphonic synthesizer. Those always lend themselves to big sounds. You know, is that something that you have sort of gradually come towards, or was there like did you start like performing with that or developing that sound, you know, sort of like later in life, or was that something you kind of gravitated to more early?
I've always had an interest for like big sound, like genre wise, like, you know, I grew up with like happy hardcore around me, which is kind of a big sound.
Right. It turns into a wash because it's just like, it's just, yeah.
And it's very textural because like, you know, the kicks are overdriven through the analog mixers most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the Alpha Juno line on top, and it's just like this really like, it's kind of like, because there's so much repetition in it, it allows you to really focus on the nitty-gritty of the sound and really enjoy that.
Yeah.
So I also remember being a kid and like being on a hike, and instead of looking around, just listening to I had a water bottle and just listening to the water in my bottle and just trying to adjust like the way it sounds. And like, I really enjoyed timbre early on.
Yeah. So is it sort of, you know, sort of speaking to that, do you find that like your music is, you know, because some like I've talked to different musicians, and like sometimes they are really trying to like tell a story with their sound, you know, and it's like, you know, either through structure or through something that evokes a certain place and time. Other people are just like, I heard the sound and that's all I cared about, you know, and you know, and so there's like, it's strictly a timbral thing. Are you sort of working from a place of memory when you work with sound? Is it more of like, or is it one of those situations where you hear the sound and you follow the sound for its own sake?
There's a bit of both, and there's value in both. But on my released work, my albums, it's very much intentional. So there's going to be a theme, and I'm going to be exploring that. I will also, as I do so, let sounds that I find or melodies that I come across accidentally lead me. Mm-hmm. But oftentimes I like to be intentional with my released work.
Yeah.
But then for example, so I'll have a theme, a narrative for the album. But I sent you a sound bath that I made recently, and it's an hour long, and it's a jam with the Swan, and it's a one take.
Yeah.
And for that, I was trying to do to show an example of something I talk about on Instagram on a series that I started, which is called Wednesday Inspiration for Artists, and it's called Positive Resets. So the idea is that you had a rough day, or you've been distracted by things, and then you get to the studio, and these things stay with you, and they come in. They just like leak into your creative flow. And well, that's something you might want if that's what you want to explore. You want to have control over it.
Yeah.
And so the idea of a positive reset is that before you start, you take a memory that evokes positive emotions for you. And so the sound bath that I sent you, in that you made, you develop an instrument from using those sounds.
And we'll get into that.
Spoiler alert. I forgot the spoiler alert. So what I sent you, the sound bath, that is also available through my Patreon, is this long 1 hour jam using Positive Reset. And what I used that day for Positive Reset is, I have them here because they're always around at this time. I always have them around, but now I have them out of my desk. Are pictures of my grandparents.
Ah, nice.
And so those are like, those are memories. And they're memories. They're not just memories. They're memories that bring emotions. That brings me in an emotional state that allows me to create from that state, to come back to that state, create from it, and also offer it through the music to others. So the bliss, the feeling of like safety, the feeling of peace that I would get when I spend that time with my grandparents. I tapped into it, I re-experienced it, which was really nice. And then it gave me inspiration to make music. And then I developed with that inspiration, which also developed the feeling. And now I get to share it with you, with others, and they can enjoy it however they want and experience it however they want. But so it's a mix. It's a mix.
Yeah. So let's now that we're talking about sound and we're at a place of sound. So yeah, so one of the things that, just to tell the listeners, we collaborated on an instrument. As you said, he sent an hour-long piece that, we were talking about, like, it would be great to do this interview, but I'd also like something, for people to take away from it, something that helps, evoke you as an artist, but also gives them a chance to sort of like take those sounds and make them their own. So you provided sounds and I did some design and integrated it into an instrument. But I think it would be, before we get to that point, I want to talk about like your setup there, because it's teasing us with all of its wonderful wires and and the thunder controller there. So I think I think what would be great is if you could just perform some sounds. So since Hugo's driving the stream right now, the audio should be pretty good quality for the listeners and for the archive. And so it would be great if you could just give us a sense of some of the things that you are exploring right now and some of the music that you're playing, and show us how you play on your instrument. And then we can get into sort of the technical details of what's going on there. Does that sound good?
That sounds great.
Excellent.
I'll just do a short improvisational piece and then we can talk about it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm going to step out over here and grab a drink while you do that.
Actually, if you could tell me, check the levels.
Okay. Let me, I will have to do that. Let me go ahead and mute myself. And I'm going to have to take off my headphones. So if you try to tell me something, I'll have to back. I'm running out of space here. So I'm going to mute my microphone and then go turn up the stream a little bit. And then in about 20 seconds, I'll hear you. But first, I need to figure out how to mute my microphone. Okay, here we go. Where do you get the feedback? I'm getting a lot of modulation. Let me untangle my cords here. I apologize. Getting a lot of modulation in there. I'm not sure if that's part of the audio or part of the stream, or a result of like compression in the stream.
Oh, I have some chorus.
Okay. It's kind of like going in and out. But let's just try it. You know, we're in bold new frontiers here inside of our houses. So I think we're just gonna have to try it out, and maybe the stream will sort of clear itself up. Probably move the zoom window off, and that might free up a little bandwidth. And then just go ahead and show us how you play. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right, cool. right. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Excellent. Getting some good echo there, as I forgot to turn down my speakers. All right. Can you hear me all right? All right. Thank you very much. I think YouTube was kind of destroying the audio there. But I think, but the cool thing is at least, you know, we're doing what we can. We're trying to be resourceful here. Eventually, I think we'll figure out like better ways of collaborating, bringing music to people in our unusual socially distanced state. But at least we got to see you play, and we could see, you know, some of your interactions, which I think is worthwhile, because this is actually an angle. Like at a concert, people will get better sound, but they're not going to get this angle on your interactions with the gear. So let's take away the positives from that. So is it possible to give us an overview of what some of that interaction is, and what your sound sources are, and how you are controlling the sounds? And we, so those are the
video. I just removed the video of us from the stream.
Okay.
So that things can be shown on the modular and seen.
Okay.
So for this patch, it's kind of my go-to patch when I'm like this. Like it's like a nice day, and I'm trying to make an improvisational piece that's kind of ambient. Like I would do that for like if I have image available and I'm trying to make sound for it, or if I'm just trying to, you know, bring myself to a calmer state, or bring someone to a calmer state and play for them. So this is one of my couple of modular cases, and that's the one I probably use the most.
Okay.
So in the center of sound generation is this one here. And I'm not sure if there's going to be a delay between my fingers pointing and the audio or not.
No, I think it's probably pretty good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So this one is this unit here, and that's a polyphonic synthesizer in the URAC format.
Okay.
And that's the one you mentioned earlier that I worked on. And then, so I have Morph. That's the control.
Yeah, and then so how does that link up? So you're using the Scorp. So just for quick technical background, the Morph sends out Bluetooth and USB MIDI, and then in order to interface with hardware, we use things like there's a lot of different things you can do USB, but you always need some sort of host. So if you want to go to 5-pin MIDI, you can use like the RetroKits RK005. The Kenton USB is also really good. I'm sure there's other things out there. And then if you want to go to CV in a Eurorack setup, there's a lot of different options, like the Expert Sleepers FH2, the Snyderphonics Mantamate, and the Endorphins Shuttle Control, and the Poly and Poly 2 are all things that you can just plug a Morph into and get control voltage out for Eurorack. And then you're using the Scorp Hermod, which also has a USB host and has the additional benefit of being a sequencer. So that's a little bit of background for folks. Yeah. So how do you take advantage of what the Hermod has to offer in your setup?
Right. So my main voice is this one, like we said. Actually, I didn't play anything else than this one. It's going through a delay and a verb, but that's it. And so, because this one is polyphonic and polytimbral, it's very nice to have Hermod, the Blue Cloud Thunder overlay and Morph to work with. But like you said, you need something to interface between Morph and the modular, and for me, that's Hermod. And the way Hermod does that is that, in my case, it's taking CC messages, so MIDI messages for controls, and it's listening to them, and those messages are assigned to different keys, and you can assign X, Y, and Z being pressure on each key to a different CC, and then Hermod can read them separately, and you can map that however you want. So for example, right now, I bring my voice back in, maybe here. I have notes.
Oh, we lost your audio there. We're getting overwhelmed by the synthesizer here. Sorry, we get drowned out there.
How about now?
Okay, I think that's probably a little better. Oh, that was cool. So in this case, you had to it's just, again, for sort of background, you needed to reprogram the Morph with your computer in the Sensel app to adapt the controllers to things that the Hermod could listen to, because you couldn't just like slap the Morph on and take out whatever was going to, because normally it's set up to do MPE. Are you even using notes in this case, or are you just using it as control data for pressure and X, Y, and Z?
I'm using CC mostly. I have on Hermod, you can see, I don't know if you can see it here, you can see the colors, but blue channels are going to be CC and orange are going to be notes. And I only have 2 that are orange.
Okay.
But with something like this one that has an onboard quantizer, you can do notes with CC because the quantizer will limit.
Okay. Yeah, so that's one of the things in like because I've used the Morph and CV setups to, just sort of demonstrate the possibilities for people at trade shows and things like that, and done a few videos and things like that. But a lot of times I kind of get like, okay, well, what should I exactly do? Because right. You have so many, it's like I have small setups. So in some ways it limits the possibilities, and I just kind of and obviously like I want to emphasize the interaction rather than the synthesis. But really with Eurorack, you could, because there's so many weird ways of modulating, the elements of music and elements of sound, and you can modulate those modulations with the Hermod, and right. You could, or you could have other things that are sort of like, modulating things at the same time. So what do you sort of do to, limit yourself or make decisions in that regard?
I think I kind of think about what it is I'm trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, I wanted to have like the option to have like a bed. Chordal bed.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm bringing up now. Tell me if it's overwhelming.
No, that's good. That's a good level.
But I have those chords.
Mm-hmm.
Some verb. And then I wanted to be able to modulate their timbre.
Mm.
So I'll remove the delay so you can hear it.
Yeah. So mostly you're using the control surface as a timbral exploration rather than...
No, I'm also doing notes.
Oh, you are doing the notes too. Okay.
Yeah. So I have timbre to the sides. And here, as well as here. And then I have delay time here that I can mess with and create like those washes.
The compression is destroying that.
Is it?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's all right though. This is a demonstration.
Okay.
So
I won't do it again.
No, that's okay.
I hope it's not hurtful to the ear.
No, it's not hurtful. It's just sort of breaks up and as if we're in outer space or something like that. So.
Oh, that's quite a good theme.
There you go.
And then you were asking about, so that's the timbral part.
Yeah.
So I knew I wanted to have a bass with chords.
Yeah.
That move in timbre, and then as I modulate the timbre, I can loop with my looping delay. I can loop certain timbres or certain octaves to start stacking things and start building up. But I knew I wanted to have this, but I also knew I wanted to have some melodic power on top that I can control. And so the way I did this is that I have like this strip on the Buchla Thunder that sends a CC that then gets converted to CV by the Hermod, and then goes into the CV input of this channel and then gets quantized. And so
okay. Right, so it just sort of breaks up. It's not a continuous controller in that regards. It's a stepwise controller because it's quantized.
Yes, it is stepped. It is stepped by the quantizer, and that's why I'm able to not use the pitch output. of her mod.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Right, okay.
there is a quantizer on this one.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I have another, so I have two voices. So I have one here that I can just play as a strip. And then I have another one here in the center that I can play differently. So I can play them both together.
Okay. So I'm going to check in, and I can't see the text messages from people here. So I want to see if there's any questions that people have outstanding. So yeah, audio sync is good. Let's see. Did Hugo describe how he has his Sensel layout programmed? The Thunder overlay provides so many possibilities. I'm curious where folks tend to start. So in this case, I guess you kind of had to adapt the Morph to what the Hermod could listen to. Is that right?
I thought I did at first because I thought the Hermod could only listen to CC1.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just make our windows bigger so you can see us as we
okay.
Go.
As I come back in the frame.
Yeah, come back.
There we go.
Thank you. That's a great question. So at first I thought the Hermod was limiting me, and not because I thought it could only listen to one CC, but it can actually listen to any CC. So you could have on one key of the Morph, sending to the same MIDI channel, CC1X, CC2Y, and CC3 pressure. And then you can map them all three out of three separate CV outputs of the Hermod, which would allow you with one three-dimensional touch to control 3 parameters.
Right, okay.
And so the way I made the decision for this very specific iteration, because that's the nice thing with Morph is that you can create different iterations. You can have one for a certain set, one for another, different approaches. It's a morphing instrument. But to answer the question that was asked, which was how do I have it set up? I think we kind of showed it, which was like notes, 2 sections, the center of the Thunderbird, of the Eagle being for notes, one strip to the side notes, and then both ends of it are for timbre, and then the thumbs are for timbre as well, and some delay modulation. So that's how I have it set up, and I have it set up this way because I started with intention of wanting to work with like a chord base, and then modulating in timbre, and then playing notes on top of this, and trying to like build an energy with that, and having modulation points I can control. Yeah. So that's how I chose how to make this overlay. I will say though, it is something that I understand the challenge of the person that asked the questions. Because there are lots of options, and that's the beauty of it, but that's also a challenge. So I tried to see it as an opportunity for me to really consider what I want to do. Yeah. It's not just like a plug and play and the pathway has been made for me. I'm going to think about how it makes me think about how I want to interact with whatever I'm using the Morph with. Right now it's my modulator. So it makes me think, okay, what kind of piece am I trying to make? And why? What am I trying to express? What emotion am I trying to express? What do I need to do that? Okay, what would feel like the natural gesture for this? Like, is timbre something that's related to pressure? Is timbre more something that's a slide along the y-axis? Yeah. Is a note, something that I want to have keys for, or that I just want to rub my finger on a strip for? And so those are all choices that you make. And I think that because I have the quantizer here, and I wanted to be able to do this kind of like minor harmonic runs that sound like I'm like soloing like crazy on the guitar. Yeah. But just by sliding my finger, I knew that I wanted, for example, CC to be assigned to pitch, but a CC that's on the strip that I will later assign to this one channel on this one. And to be honest, like I have like paper notes. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah. There you go. And the numbers on there. Yeah. See a 3, there's a 1, there's a 4. So those are the numbers for the outputs of Hermod. Oh, okay. Outputs. So now I know when I look at this, I know what my key is programmed to control in HERMOD, and I try to not change the settings on HERMOD. And so that could be, you could do one of these for each version of the overlay you have, or each overlay.
Yeah.
And then kind of keep track like that. What I've been liking to do so far is kind of and I might be biased because I spent 3 years more working on the Swan, a bit more than that. And that it's, from the instrument conception and design perspective, I like to spend a lot of time reiterating, and kind of like a sculpture would start with a brute block of marble and then slowly chop at it and get to a more distilled version.
Yeah.
That's kind of my approach with my patch with the Morph. I've been sticking with the Buchla Thunder overlay, and so that I'm not overwhelmed by options. I have other overlays, but this is the one I'm focusing on for
so
now.
But there's also in the Thunder, there's 9 presets too. Are you just using really just one preset, or do you have the other presets set up to access different things?
That's a very good question, because like I could like, try multiple things on different ones. But what I like to do is like do an iteration, work with it for a little bit, see as I play what I wish I had, and then back later, because those decisions are hard. It's a kind of it's a design process, and so for yourself, that the Morph allows you to access. And so personally, and I'm not saying it should be for everyone, but for me it's iterative. So I will have an idea and just keep it simple. I don't try to shoot for the moon right away. I do something first patch that's simple, and then try that, play with it, and see what I'd like to add on top. And I might have some crazy ideas that sound like fun ideas, but I don't add them unless there's something I felt like doing or playing. And then slowly I can build like this. And, I'm still on the same patch that I've started. Buchla patch Buchla Thunder overlay patch that I've started maybe a few months ago. And I'm still iterating, and I think it's nice. It's nice to actually be able to take your time, because it takes time to define your practice and how you interact with instruments. And you're also kind of carving the instruments.
Yeah. Cool. Well, okay. So let's transition to sort of the instrument that we made, which comes in a few iterations. And so there were a couple of things that because like I said, I really wanted to do a takeaway for people, because everybody needs something right now, and it's also because your sounds are really evocative and rich, and there's kind of a challenge to be like, well, how can not
everybody has access to an expensive modular system,
right? But the timbres are so big and rich, and there's all this possibility, and it's like, well, it'd be great to bring some of that to more, shall we say, distributable format that is also not static in the way that like a recording is, not passive. So so I took your sounds, and I got to do some camera shifting here. And kind of adapted them and this is kind of like I ran with it and hope it has artist approval. So, because it's like, I got your sounds, and it was one of those things where, my instinct as a sort of producer or engineer was like, oh, can we get stems of this? And you're like, that you're talking about the sound bath that you sent me. And you're like, no, it was actually just a 2-track recording. And I'm like, well, how can I work with this? And sort of took that on myself. So let's see, I want to test, I got to do some switching over here and test to make sure that I'm getting the right inputs. So you're going to lose my voice. Oh no. And hopefully get some music here. So did you hear that, Hugo? Hopefully.
Yeah, it was
okay. Quiet. Yeah, it's probably a little bit quiet. I can bump it up, but I just want to make sure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play, and I've already sent out a couple demos today on YouTube and other places, but those are more succinct. But I'll give you an idea of, I'll just sort of break down sort of the simple interactions without voiceover, and then I'll talk about them, I guess. So you'll probably hear some similar things. I guess probably just to introduce so people know what they're listening to is that each key is just like a maybe 15-second chunk of the hour-long piece that he sent me. And then on the top buttons, and then because the L and K are actually repeated up here, these are all synthesizer, just like native synthesizers in Bitwig and in Falcon, because I did 2 versions. And then down here are some effects controls. So I have delay and reverb down here, and a little, when I press on here, there's going to be a high frequency sort of killing on a high frequency damping on the reverb. And then over here I have a distortion and a resonator. So these are all like these great, timbral inputs for the master output. But then this is an MP instrument, so each sample I have control over each individual timbre. So I'll give an example of that and switch over now. So that was sort of an emphasis on demonstration rather than artfulness. But again, so these are, each one has a bandpass filter on it, so I can mix the timbres of each one without each sample sort of over intruding on the other one. And then these are just sort of like these nice, I don't know, buzzy sounds that kind of excite the senses. And yeah, so it's really just kind of like a great way to interact with this sort of sensibility and the timbres in software. And I have to say that there was sort of a selfish motivation here initially. Oh God, you see all my mess there? No.
Or maybe I can stop the stream. Hey, there's 30 seconds delay.
At least I'm wearing pants, right? But so the point, so like I was saying, I kind of got selfish there because I saw this as an opportunity of like working with something that we could distribute, because we wanted to give that sort of like universal thing. And I was like, oh, the UVI Falcon would be awesome for this, because as I understood it, people could load the UVI Falcon patches into their workstation thing, kind of like Contact, and then just be able to play it in any VST and any DAW. And this is something I've kind of been working towards without having to create my own plugin, because I don't have the bandwidth to maintain software like that. So I went really down the UVI Falcon wormhole, and this is actually a stream that I want to do down the road and give people a taste of how to work with the Falcon and how to integrate the Morph into that setup. I was introduced by Peter Freeman, and so we have an artist profile on our YouTube channel of Peter Freeman, where he is using both the original Thunder and the Thunder overlay with UVI Falcon, and it's super cool. But it turns out that I can't actually do that without making more arrangements with UVI. So hopefully in the next month or two, I'll get in touch with the right people there, and then we'll actually have something we can distribute on a wider basis. But as it is, I did it in Bitwig as well. So it's really similar in Bitwig. As it is in Falcon, but of course they have different like sort of DSP engines and effects and stuff. So they sound different, but they're both they both work the same. So we'll have a link in the comments as for the landing page for that. And there's a little bit more information on that page as well about what Hugo's doing right now. So you're working on, because, like many musicians out there, you're in the situation where now you're sheltering in place, and that is totally antithetical to touring out of place. So that's another thing I kind of want to talk to all the artists that I'm doing in these things is like, how are you coping with this? Like, what sort of, what things are you doing to change? What things are you working on before that make it so that, maybe you were already sort of, getting to a point where touring wasn't necessarily your main source of artistic output and income, of course.
Yeah, touring was for me, and it's like, so I was staged to tour in May, and that's canceled for now.
Mm-hmm.
And in the grand scheme of things, this is like a small bullet to dodge because there's people whose lives are much more affected. I am thankful I didn't increase my overheads this year and kept low overheads, so I'm trying to ride the storm as well as I can.
Yeah.
But in terms of activity, I'm also thankful because I had decided to start a company, an audio production company, at the beginning of the year. And so I'm taking client mixes and I'm mixing albums for people. I just finished Baltergeist's first album, and it's really fun to do an entire album with him. And now it's going in the hands of Nathan Moody in the Bay Area for mastering. And so it's really exciting to do this and to have this source of revenue. And like I said, when I started making music right away, I was like playing with production software and really enjoying tweaking sound. And I have an ear for it, and it's just something that I do naturally and enjoy. So this is nice. It has slowed down, which is unfortunate because I was starting. But I'm hoping it will pick back up, and that everyone that's making tons of music with their Sensel Morph and their Bitweek presets will have tons of music for me to mix.
There you go.
That'd be fun to get to mix tracks that I would be made with samples that I made. That'd be super interesting. So that is one thing. And then there's something else I wanted to do. I've always wanted to show more of myself on social media, so I've shifted that recently. And I've wanted to share, I'm interested in education, so I wanted to share more of what I do, because I also do sound design for brands like Novation. And I obviously I worked on this one. I've also done sound design for it. I tour, I have experience like setting up a live rig, all this. So I wanted to share things, but it turns out that at this stage of things, like, I realized I really want to share the human aspect of things. So the part we talked about, like I was asked, someone asked a great question, like, how do you choose what you put on your overlay? And so options is great, but also how do you choose? And it all depends. It all boils down to, what is your intention? What are you trying to do and why? What are you trying to convey? Like, the Morph is a tool to help you convey through a medium, which is music. And then what you're conveying is emotions or your intent, whatever it is, but you need to figure that out. So I started this series on Instagram that's called Wednesday Inspiration for Artists, and it's free. And you can watch it every Wednesday. And then there's worksheets available on my Patreon, sample packs, because I'm also starting a community. We're all going to be making tracks together with us, samples, exclusive tracks, and sound baths like the one you received, Peter, which you made the instrument with. Peter received the exact same file you'd find on my Patreon, and he made the whole instrument with it. It's an hour-long piece that's very meditative and great for like trying to calm down at the end of the day, or focus on something important. It's not necessarily my most pretentious work. It's very simple but also textural, and it comes from a place that I wanted to illustrate the concept of positive reset, which we talked about earlier, which is something that came out of the Wednesday Inspiration for Artists.
Yeah, because I think, sorry, I was gonna say that's kind of like a really important thing, is that sort of your idea of the positive reset, because I think that's a very common struggle for people who make computer music, and especially people like work with computers, or work at a job where you're really interacting with the computer in a secretarial or work fashion, and then you're like, well, I can't. It's really hard to like break yourself out of that and transition to being creative with the same tools in a very different mind frame, you know, and even just like, yeah, just sort of that feeling of like you get done with work or whatever, and you're like, I want to create, but you're just kind of like, well, how do I shed all of that other stuff, you know? And there's a lot of different ways of doing that. And like you said, it maybe you carry that with you and use that.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like sometimes you just need a change, and you just need a quiet space and a way to like something to trigger a place for you to approach your own creativity. So,
and you can find it outside of yourself.
Yeah.
You can also find it within, like you said, using memories, using intention, trying to think about something specific. And yeah, that's also, like, I can also see an advantage for, like, I used to work on computers all day and do involved work and come back. And sometimes I leverage this energy because to create some more conceptual pieces that we're not here to convey an emotion, but be more like a concept, like a complex concept or something that's more brainy.
Yeah.
Like, that's using the right side of the brain. So if you like come back from a day of work, maybe you can even, and your work is involved in this way, you can leverage that momentum you have from the day.
Sorry, I'm going to leave the frame here and check the comments. So I don't have those in front of me. So yeah, cool. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I have them too. Yeah.
Oh, okay. You can see them too?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Loic.
All right, cool. Oh, wow. Loic, nice. It says, Connor, it's so tiring to make music in the box when everything you press on a computer is so sit and click, on and off, 1 and 0. And this instrument reopens the ability to feel like you're playing a kinetic instrument with movement of the body and injection of soul into your performance, or even just composition and production. And yeah, like it's one of the things that I've sort of been talking about with the Morph is the fact that, like, especially with MPE, and this goes for kind of MPE in general, whatever your controller, but obviously I work with the Morph a lot, so it's particularly resonant for me, is that, you know, like you can kind of access a new sort of metaphor, because a lot of music uses the metaphors of musical instruments, you know, this, as far as the synthesis of music, is plucking, stroking, bowing, hitting, things like that. And so, which is all really wonderful inspiration. But then with the Morph, I've discovered it's like, oh, well, this is actually like a sensual thing. And now massage is a metaphor. And so, you know, I'm constantly, especially like using that pressure, you know, for example, in the software instrument that we're releasing, is the pressure in the Bitwig version affects the panning of it adds sort of like an auto pan effect to that particular voice. So you can really broaden out the sound or bring it in just by, you know, leaning into it. And, you know, and that's just like, to me, it's a very gratifying gesture to incorporate. You know, it's like, oh, I'm connected and I belong with this in a way that, you know, it's a lot of times you can't get with a piano keyboard. And with even just like traditional instruments, like you definitely use your body a lot, but it's in a different way.
And it's one of the rare instruments that can morph, really, like change its interface.
Yeah.
Like, I find that interesting, especially for someone who travels. Like I travel a bunch for touring, but also to visit my family in France. And so being able to take a small piece of equipment like this, I get FOMO, fear of missing out, every time I travel. Like, yeah. Oh, how do I take, like, oh, what if someone commissions me to work on, I don't know why every time every time I land in France, I get commissioned to work on film music. And it's like, I'm away from my studio. No.
Yes.
And so I get fear of missing out when I travel. I'm like, what if this happens? What if I don't have the gear? I need to anticipate everything. And then now I can grab the Morph and be like, okay, I have the Morph in my laptop and I'm pretty confident I can work with this.
Yes, hopefully you can travel again soon. So
there's that too. That's a problem that is solved a different way at the moment.
Yes, you know? Yeah. But I think that, you know, that's one of the things that I think it's like you were talking about, is like the intention and stuff. Like, it's like, yeah. You know, a lot of times it's, you know, in the past, like a month ago, you know, it's like you could sort of rely on habits and things like that. And like everybody's creative habits are just getting upended. And I'm like, one of the things I hope to do with this series is kind of like try to just like keep putting ideas out there on a weekly basis so that somebody can just like, oh, wait, maybe that's going to work for me. And like you said, intention, like, yeah, you're really, I think in order to be creative and productive in this environment, you're going to have to sort of revisit and think about intention and like, okay, what's available to me? What can I convey? You know, it's like, okay, I can't play live. And instead of fixating on that, you know, and even because like you're, you know, and it's easy to do because like your paycheck is, you know, dependent on it. But it's like, you know, how are you going to still like, I think this community is creative enough that we are going to find ways that are going to, you know, make the expression rich and in a different way. Maybe it's going to be more of a storytelling medium than and I use that term loosely, like than as an experience for community, you know? So it's maybe some of the things we're gonna have to direct more towards like a novel rather than the idea of, you know, of being together. So I don't know. There's gonna be a lot of thought we all have to put into this stuff. So
yes.
So yeah, any last words? That sounds so ominous. We're a little bit over an hour here. I think we've gotten a lot of information out there. Any other thing you want to add before we say goodbye to our lovely participants out there?
From the comments or from me?
No, just from you, or yeah, if there's anything in the comments that you see that you want to respond to.
No, I'm just really thankful for all the nice things that were said in the comments.
Oh, great.
And I'm very thankful that you invited me to be part of this. Like I said, it's my first stream like this, and it's kind of like breaking the ice with it because it's so foreign to me to bring objects with cameras in my personal creative space like that.
Yes.
You know, but it's also very liberating to feel like, hey, we're isolating right now, but we're also able to like all hang out in my studio, which actually would not be possible in real life because it's so small.
Yeah.
And we're able to talk about things and spend some time together, which is like, I don't know, that's so nice. And that's when technology gets us together, it's nice, you know, and not just like Zoom and everything else, but also like, you know, Morph. We're talking about like, hey, how do you approach your art? How do you set up an instrument that's so open-ended?
Yeah.
Do you express yourself? How do you find ways that work for you to express yourself? And we're trying to inspire each other, and I think that's great.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being part of this. And yes, Hugo R.A. Paris, HugoParisMusic.com, and Patreon.com/Hugo Paris Music. So everybody follow him. His Instagrams are always lovely too. So
thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your time. And
I want to say one more thing.
Yes,
I want to thank Control Voltage in Portland, who's been part of this too. Our friends,
absolutely.
Good friends, good people.
Jason and his family up in Control Voltage, who are still, you know, they've been a good retailer for the Morph. So, you know, if you are in Portland, or actually it doesn't matter now if you're online.
Doesn't matter. support them,
your local retailer. Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Support them, even especially in times like this, because like they still have huge overheads.
Yeah,
in their business, and it's the time to support them.
Yeah, and they have a beautiful shop. Like I was lucky that just before all this shutdown stuff happened, we went to the Portland Synth Expo, put on by the lovely Paolo at the Deli Magazine. He, you know, so we did the Portland Synth Expo, and you helped out there, and you were, and we did a little workshop, and I got to stop in the Control Voltage shop, and it's a beautiful space. So anytime you're in Portland and you're allowed, go into their shop, because it's, it's a fantastic place to get hands on, and their employees are crazy knowledgeable about all this stuff. So,
and if you're not in Portland because of the confinement, go to their web shop.
Control Voltage.
You can make sure that they're still here when confinement ends for you to come and visit them.
Yes, controlvoltage.net. Yes. And also thank you to Scorp Instruments.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. For the Hermod. So.
Yes. Yes.
All right.
They've been very helpful.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. All right. Take care.